if you get the same value twice, you don't keep it around and say, well, I'll take care of you later, you're gone, but you know, as soon as you see that there's an adjacent value next to you that has the same value, you can get rid of it. So while sorting, you can get rid of the duplicate. Another approach, which works just as well, if all you're looking for is duplicates and there's no order bug, is to use hashing. A hash table is also very good for finding duplicates. You're putting in the values inside the hash table, and if you find a duplicate value, you don't keep a count, you don't keep both, you just say, yeah, I already got this, it's in the hash table. So you do a search for it. If it's there, you don't bother putting it in. You know, we bloat the hash table unnecessarily. So what you do is you build an in-memory hash table, and you know, basically you eliminate duplicates that occur inside that hash table. And you know, if everything fits in memory, if the whole hash table for everything fits inside memory, that's wonderful. If it doesn't all fit inside memory, then you might have to do this piece by piece by piece and then merge them together and get rid of duplicates at the end, because you don't want to have duplicates at the end. So you see the idea of how that works. We'll talk about that a lot more when we get to hash join. And again, suppose that you have an index that has both SID and BID in the search key. Not necessarily as the first columns. So if you have something in which you have SID and BID appearing, and they're not even necessarily the first columns, as we discussed, even though it doesn't match the index perfectly, you could go ahead and do some things where you just process using the index, even though they're not the major columns. So it could be, not in this case, there aren't that many columns, but if these were columns 3 and 5 inside some B tree index, right? So they're not the major fields, but they're minor, they're fields 3 and 5. You can still go ahead and see what you can do about just using the index and sorting the index entries and getting rid of duplicates, or even using hashing to be able to do that, but basically based on the SID and the BID. So you can use sorting based on SID, BID, getting rid of duplicates. Again, you don't, for this query, you don't have to touch the data. The index gives you what you want. So you could walk through, either use sorting or build a hash table as you go to get rid of duplicates. So emphasis, there are many, 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 many different techniques. You would be amazed at how many different techniques the optimizer works on. Something I emphasized in 180, I'm going to say it right now, we're going to be talking a lot about optimizer. Working about the on the optimizer is in some ways the least rewarding part of the component of a database system to work on. Now it is rewarding because it's a very hard thing to work on, and you have expertise in that. A lot of people care about that expertise. On the other hand, it's the least rewarding for another funny reason. If you improve the optimizer and make things better for 99% of the people, you know who you hear from? The 1%. No relationship to Bernie Sanders. You hear from the 1% because if their stuff, well, if it stayed the same, they won't say anything. But if their stuff suddenly got worse, everything was working fine. Why did you mess up my query? Take it back the way it was. Interesting field. Okay, now there's notation that is used in the textbook. I'm not going to use their notation. I think their notation stinks. In general, I think it's a very good textbook, despite being something on the order of 15 to 17 years old. But I'm going to, usually I try to follow the notation of the textbook even when I don't like it. This one, no. The book, when it's talking about, their relations are and S. We're going to talk about the number of pages in the table. We're going to talk about the number of tuples in the table. We're going to talk about the number of tuples per page in the table. And we'll have two tables, which are going to be R and S, which amusingly enough stands for reserves and sailors. So we're going to have tables R and S, reserves and sailors. And so the book talks about M as being the pages in R. I'm going to write pages sub R. I can remember that. And it uses N for pages sub S. I'm going to use pages sub S, okay? The book uses, basically, as a number of tuples per page, it uses P sub R, which actually would be reasonable. for tuples per page, I'm gonna, piece of R, I'm gonna fix that. Doesn't that mean the pages in R? I can't keep that straight. I'm gonna write TP piece of R, which is tuple per page of R. I can remember that. Okay, and then the number of tuples in R, I'm gonna write cardinality sub R every time I wanna have that. And if I need to write out what that equals, that's gonna be the product of the pages in R times the tuples per page of R. Again, we're assuming no free space. So if you multiply the pages times the tuples per page, that gives you the number of tuples, the cardinality number of tuples. What the book writes is, as the number of tuples in R, m times p sub R. And it writes m times p sub s for s. So again, pages sub R, TPP, tuples per page sub R, and cardinality sub R, which is the simple product of pages times tuples per page. I can keep that straight. The other thing, I taught this course 3 times using the other thing, and I got sick of it. So you're exposed to what I hope is an improvement. It will be different from the book. It's an easy mapping to make. I think all of you can handle it. So, for a wonderful example, which we're spending a lot of time with, for sailors, pages of sailors, pages of S is 500 pages, TPP is 80 per, the stuff that we had on that early slide 7 that we looked at. Cardinality of sailors is 40K, which is 500 times 80. For reserves, pages, 1,000 pages, TPP is 100, and cardinality of reserves is the product of 1,000 times 100. This is all stuff that we looked at already, just using that terminology. Everybody okay? Now, we're gonna go forward, and we're gonna look at, first of all, several different ways of doing join. And warning, we're gonna start off with some straw horses that are very dreadful to show you how bad an optimizer can be. Don't worry, it gets better. This is what's called the nested loop join. When I started telling you about joins, or even just, select, from 2 different relations, I said it's like 2 nested for loops. That's what this is, 2 nested for loops. So you've already seen this. We're gonna use simple nested loop join for every tuple in R, for every tuple in, S and S, and since there's a join involved, there's gonna be a join column I of R compared to column J of S, and if the join column has a match, so it could be multiple join columns, not just writing it as one, but you get the idea. Then I'm going to add R, S, the tuple RS to the result. I may only care about some columns, in the select clause, but the idea is just loop through all the tuples in R, loop through all the columns in S, see if there's a match, and put things inside the result. So we'll talk about the outer relation. This could have been S, but in this case it's R. The outer for loop is on R. And the inner loop is, of course, on S. So what's going on? For every tuple in the outer relation, we're scanning the entire inner relation. And some of you are saying, barf, this is dreadful. You're right. It is a straw man, a straw horse. So let's see what's going on here. So for every tuple in the outer, we're going to scan the entire inner. Okay? So it means what we're going to have to do is go through every page of R and look at all the tuples on each of the pages. But once we have a page of R inside memory, we'll be able to loop through all the tuples on that page. We don't have to go ahead and bring the page in more than once. So we have 1 page of R in memory. Let's assume that stays there because we just touched it. And then for every tuple inside R, cardinality of R, we're going to have to touch every single page in S. I'm not assuming in this that all the pages in S stay inside memory, because there might be, a lot of different pages inside S. So basically, in this case, there are 500 pages inside S. So if we're assuming that they're not in memory, again, not a real assumption today, then the cost is going to be 1,000 to go through the tuples inside R, which means going through the pages of R. Each page gets touched just once. And then for every tuple inside R, 100,000 tuples inside R, we're going to touch every page inside S, the 500 pages inside S. That's big. That's very big. Well, by the way, as I mentioned, here's an improvement right now. We could switch around R and S. And that will reduce the number. So you could do that, but let's not bother doing that. We're gonna have something which is still more clever. We're gonna have a page-oriented or block-oriented nested loop join, sometimes called page-oriented, more often called block-oriented. And here's the idea. Instead of doing what I described in 180, what we're gonna do is for every page of R, we're gonna look at every page of S and look for matches between them. You got a page of R, look at matches with the first page of S, for that page of R. So you have a page of R, look at all the matches with the first page of S, all the tuples on that. You still have that page of R, look at all the matches on the second page of S. Then the third page of S. So you're looping through the pages instead of looping through the tuples. It's page or block oriented nested loop join. So it's still looping, but it's basically for each page of R, look page at a time at the tuples that you have inside S. So you get each page and you write out the matching tuples RS, where again, R is in the page of R, S is in the page of S. Look at all the matches. So you look at a page of R, look at all the different pages of S one at a time. So the page of R is still there. You look at all the matches on the page of S rather than, so that's going to be a clever way of doing it. And the cost of that, you're going to go through all the pages of R, again, just as we did before, but now for every page in R, you're looking at all the tuples on that one page and looking at their matches one by one at the pages of S. Page of R, page of S. Same page of R, next page of S. Same page of R, next page of S, until you get to the end. So basically, how many times do you have to look at the pages in S? Pages of R times. Right? It's the loop, pages of R times pages of S. It's because it's for each page of R, you're looking at matches for all the tuples on that page with one page at a time, things on page of S. Everybody okay or not? Questions? Okay. That's better. That's 1,000 plus 1,000 times 100. That's a whole lot better. And by the way, I can switch around S and R again. Again, in this case, I can make it better still by having S as the outer and R as the inner. It's going to be pages of S plus pages of S times pages of R. So it's going to be 500 plus 500 times 1,000, which again is better. It's only about 500, but you know, 500 is okay. Somewhat better. Okay, so basically now we're going to get to a index nested loop join, which is going to be better still. And here there is an assumption that we have a join predicate and there's an index that corresponds to the column, one of the columns, not necessarily both. Don't have to have indexes on both of them. And in this case, we'll assume that there is an index on the inner, which in this case happens to be S. If there were an index on the column of R, the join column of R, we could switch the rows of S and R around, just as I did on the previous slide. So here the assumption is that there is an index on the inner table, on the join column of the inner table. The join columns are R sub I and S sub J. So for each tuple of R in R, what we're going to do is only look at the matching tuples in S. What's a matching tuple? We have our hands around the neck of a tuple in R. That means we have a value of R sub I. We only want the S sub J tuples that match, that have S sub J equal to R sub I. So we can use that index to find the tuples in S that match the tuple we already have our hands around the neck of, sorry to be violent, inside R. So for that particular tuple of R, and we're going to go through all the tuples in R, but for each particular tuple of R, get the matching S tuples. Because again, we're avoiding irrelevance. If there are 100 matching tuples, those are the only ones we care about. The index allows us to avoid the irrelevant tuples in S. If there's one, we only get that relevant one. If there are 0, move along, nothing to see here. Okay, so that's what's going on. And so the cost of that is gonna be equal to, well, we have to go through every tuple in R, but we only have to touch each page in R once, get all the tuples on the first page and find the matching S, et cetera, et cetera. So touch the tuples in R one at a time, touching all the tuples on each page before you let go of that page. Get the matching tuples inside S. It's gonna be for each tuple in R, which is cardinality of R. It's the number of tuples in R. We're gonna have the cost of finding the matching S tuples. Naturally, you're gonna ask me, what's the cost of finding the matching S tuples? Well, it depends on what kind of index you got. What kind of access path you have to find the matching S tuples. So you've got an index. So the cost, and yeah, there's a lot of handling in here. If you have a hash index, then the cost is gonna be, about 1.2 for a hash index. Right, so, and it'll be about between 2 and 4. Again, these calculations these days are not quite right, but 2 to 4 for the hash tree. And this just, ends up, based on, some unrealistic today assumptions about how the thing's laid out and what ends up sitting inside memory. These are gonna be used in the calculations. I'm sticking to them. If you have a situation where things are more in memory, then the cost would actually end up being 0. If the cost is something where just all the top levels except the bottom level, the leaf level, the B tree in memory, that ends up playing with it. Basically, play with your assumptions about what the cost is to prove your hash index in the B tree, and your numbers will change. These are numbers which were valid in the days of System R, back in the 1970s, 1980s. It's not entirely valid today, but the comment is that if you end up having a clustered index and you're looking for an exact match, the cost would be 1. Well, actually, it depends on how many matches you have. If there's exactly 1 match, then, say on a primary key, then the cost would just be 1, because the data is right there inside the index itself. You go into it, typically top levels of the tree are around, and you just have to touch the lower level. For the under index, it might be 1 IO per matching, S tuple, because you have to go out to the data for each matching S tuple. Some of the pages aren't in memory. So, basically that's the cost that's involved. And again, these things are not necessarily realistic today. And now we come to a different algorithm, which is called the block nested loop join. All the nested loop joins are called that because it's nested for loops. But we're going to take advantage of hashing. So this is the block nested loop join. First example of something that you might seriously want to use in practice, perhaps, but the other stuff has been used too. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to use a variation of what we talked about before with input buffers. And again, you might want to have shadow pages for it. But we'll talk about this without playing with shadow pages for the input buffer, the output buffer. And what we're going to do is we're going to go one by one in this particular case. We're going to go ahead and have 1 page for the inner relation S. Either one of them could be the inner relation, but we'll say that S is the inner relation here. And here's what we're going to do. If we have a situation where we have B buffers inside memory, we're going to use one of those B buffers for a block of S. We're going to use one of these blocks for an output buffer, which leads us to a maximum of B minus 2 blocks, which is less than B minus 1. So we have B minus 2 blocks, which we're going to use for a hash table. Okay, why a hash table? Hash tables are good for finding exact matches. What are we going to put inside the hash table? Well, okay, before I go forward on that, I realize that R might be bigger than B minus 2 pages. That's okay. We're going to do this a number of times. We're going to do this for every group of B minus 2 pages inside R. So we've got B minus 2 at most. We've got, but let's say it's B minus 2. We have B minus 2 pages that are used for the hash table. So if B minus 2 isn't big enough to hold all of our We'll do it again and again and again until we're enough pages in line. And here's what we're gonna do. What we're gonna go ahead and do is we've got this thing with a block of S that's in there. And we'll find all the matches using the hash table. We have a hash function, a good hash function, that uses all these blocks and spreads all the R values through. And we have to keep track of the actual exact S values. And so we'll take the first tuple that we have in this input buffer for S. And we'll use the same darn hash function. Well, of course, the same darn hash function. We want to see what all the matches are for it inside this hash table that we built for the first b minus 2 blocks of R. Do we put RS in the answer if the hash functions match? Nope. The values have to match. The hash table doesn't just have the hash function. Hash function isn't the important part, it's the actual value that's there. So inside our hash buckets, we have things that correspond to the value, but the actual values of R sub I. So it's not enough to find that H of an S value is equal to H of an R value. We have to take a look at the values of S matching the values of R. And when you find values that match, you find an output tuple. So you go through that input buffer for S, all the tuples inside that page, one by one by one by one, nested loop, and you find the matches inside the hash table. And when I'm done with that block of S, you know what I do next? The bear went over the mountain. No. You go to the next block of S. One by one, you're going through all the pages of S, all the blocks in S. Using that same hash table that had the first b minus 2 pages of R in a hash table. It's a little extra overhead to make it a hash table, but basically you're going ahead and you're dealing with the matching things that you found inside. Okay? And by the way, inside the hash table, although I could be clever about this, I'm not only keeping the search key, I'm actually keeping the tuples because I may need the entire tuple for whatever I'm doing next. When I'm doing a join, I don't just need whether or not there's a match, I may need the exact value of the whole tuple. So the whole tuple may be kept there inside the hash table. Again, I can be clever about projection and when I do it, but we'll get into that later. So go through every single tuple in every single block in S, and then every single tuple in that block, and match it up with the hash table. And now I'm done with S. What do I do next? I've gotten only b minus 2 of the tuples from R. I get the next b minus 2 blocks worth of tuples from R. And I go through every block in S the same way. So I build a new hash table, same way, based on this hash function. And I'll go through every tuple in S again to find the matches that exist. So as I put things out, as an output buffer fills up, I write it out. And when I'm done, I've gotten all my matches. And that's the block nested loop join. Does it work? Yeah, I find all the matches. Remember, I have to check not just based on hash functions, but exact value of the search of the. It's not a search. Well, it is a search key, but it's a join column. It's matching join columns. Hashing is fun for the whole family. It really does end up helping enormously in doing a lot of different algorithms. There's no need to sort. We will be looking at an algorithm sort merge, or merge join. But this works, very very nicely. Question.
How big does the hash table need to be? Would it be the cardinality of S and R?
The hash table size is b minus 2. B minus 2 blocks. Whatever number of things you can fit inside b minus 2 blocks.
Oh.
And if you're doing this. Now again, the hash table size is going to be a little bit bigger than the actual, size of the blocks that we have inside R, because there's a little bit of extra overhead because it's a hash table, but it's going to be a small constant factor that ends up affecting it. So you just have to hash the tuples, you have to put the tuples into the hash table. It's not much bigger than the actual total size of the tuples.
And excuse me, B is what?
The number of buffers that I have.
Oh,
The number of buffers that I have in memory. Another question.
You answered it.
Okay, so you see the idea of what's going on over there and how this ends up producing the result that I want. And this again can end up being much better than the other variations of it. It's another variation of nested loop join. Okay, and just since I mentioned sort merge, I only have 2 minutes left, but it actually isn't going to take much longer than that to go over this algorithm. It's a very, very simple kind of algorithm. So I'll just explain how it works. We'll go over it again next time, but I want to explain it. Sort R on the sort column. Its sort column is R sub I. Sort S based on the sort column. It's the join column. Its join column is S sub J. So they're now both sorted. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do a merge join. We're going to, again, traffic hops show up again. We're going to look at R and S. If there's equality, we're going to get all the pairs of equality that we have, and we're going to output them. There might be 5 in R, there might be 7 in S. We're going to output 35 things because there are matches. If you don't have equality, one has to be smaller than the other. Advance the one that's smaller. Now again, you either have equality or one is smaller than the other. Maybe now this is smaller, advance it until you have equality, you know, or it goes past the other value. You keep advancing whichever is smaller until you have equality. When you have equality, you take all the matches in R and all the matches of S and you output them into your result. And you'll never bypass matches because it's all sorted. So there might be, again, for one tuple in R, there might be 100 matches in S. That's okay, put out all the matches that correspond to that and then advance both. You might have, you know, 5 tuples with the same value in R and there are 17 matches inside S. Put out the 5 times 17, which is 85. Put out the 85 matches and advance both of them. Traffic hops advancing, only letting the smallest value go through, but when there's a match, this is a case of a collision where there's something good. Matching, you know, gives you something inside your answer. So basically, anytime you get a current match of a value in R, you're going to match it up with all the values in S, and if there are ties inside R, those other values are going to get put out with the same value in S as well. So one more time, if there are, you know, 12 values in R that have the same thing, same value, and the join column, and there are, you know, 20 things in S that have the same value, you'll output the 240 things. The value in R matches 20 things in S, the next value in R matches the same 20 things. You can't advance S until you have all the matches of R coming out. So basically, what's this going to do? It's going to scan R once, and each S group is only going to be scanned once per matching tuple. The reason this is worth mentioning is, you know, you take the worst case where all the worst case, it sounds good. All the values are equal. Everything in R equals everything in S. You'll have to scan R, and then for each value in R, you have to scan the entire S group each time. So in the worst case on this, it is going to be pages of R plus pages of R times you know, pages of S. Again, you can be clever and do a kind of, you know, block version of that to get all the matches. But typically, you're not going to have everything matching everything, but you could. But you get the idea. We'll go over this again at the beginning next time. I'm out of time. To be continued. You wanted to know what was going on under the covers, variations of this, what's going on under the